A very good morning to all of you, dear students. Good morning,
Morning, ma'am.
everyone. Good morning.
Morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning. Good morning, everyone. Kindly unmute yourself so that we can just greet each other. A very good morning to all of you, and it's really nice to see you all here today. We will start with our lecture for today. 21st July, we begin with our third lecture. Everyone ready for it?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. That's great. Okay. So we begin with today's lecture. I will start today's lecture with a very interesting quote by somebody whose work we are going to start today. I hope I am audible to everyone. Humera, could you please say okay if I am audible enough?
Okay.
Okay, please mute yourself. I request everyone, each one of you, to mute yourself. Okay, I start today's lecture, as I said before, with a very meaningful quote from by someone whose work today we'll be studying. He is Mr. Harold Lloyd Urey, and he says that goal of life is not to possess power but to radiate it. Think upon this and see if you get a message out of this. So far, in the last lecture, we have studied about the chemical evolution of life, or the chemical theory of evolution of life. This theory talked about how life evolved on this earth because of a series of chemical reactions that took place. There were two small subunits in that part. One is the coacervate theory, and two is the microsphere theory. These two paragraphs we will be studying a little later to make sense out of it. Today, on a fresh note, we shall start with the Miller's and Urey's experiment, which gives us a validation, which proves the chemical theory of life. इसका मतलब मिलर्स यूरे एक्सपेरिमेंट सपोर्ट करता है केमिकल थ्योरी ऑफ एवोल्यूशन को. जो केमिकल थ्योरी ऑफ एवोल्यूशन में दिया है वो सारा उन्होंने प्रूव किया है with the help of Miller's Urey experiment. So Urey and Miller's experiment gives us proof or evidence about how life must have originated on this earth because of a series of chemical reactions. If there is an experiment, you need a setup. Am I right? Correct? You need a setup. A setup that will give you results. So there is always something that you have to study in an experiment so as to derive results. Stanley Lloyd Miller and Harold Clayton Urey, these two scientists propagated, endorsed the theory of chemical evolution. According to them, they have evidences that will show to us in a lab setup how the chemical reactions took place, because of which the first life on this earth has originated. To be more precise, how the first living molecule on this earth came into existence. This is the experimental setup of Miller's Urey experiment. If you see, there is something that is constantly flowing from A to B to C to D. Okay? Yes? Now, what are these things? This Miller's Urey experimental setup is made up of a spark discharge apparatus. एक ऐसा apparatus है जहां पे जिसमें एक spark generate होगा. It comprises of a closed system of glass. So if you go on YouTube and you try to see the experimental setup of Miller's Urey experiment, you will be able to see that the entire setup is made up of glass. This setup has two electrodes that are made up of tungsten, 1 and 2. These electrodes will generate spark or discharge spark when there is a requirement. There is a water flask, and in this water flask, the water is continuously boiled. And because of the boiling of water, the water is converted into water vapor. So because of elevation in temperature, the water which is now at normal state has got itself converted into water vapor. There is a cooling jacket. What do you mean by this? When this water goes here, passes across this setup, which is the spark discharge apparatus, and when it comes down here, there is something that will cool this water. And then further on, when this water which is cooled comes down, there is a U-shaped trap which will trap the contents which come from there. And when you trap the contents which you derive towards the end of this experiment, you will test the contents for the quality as to see what is present in those contents. So, Miller's Urey experiment talks about an experimental setup where you have water which is boiling because of heat provided to it, changing to water vapor, providing it an experimental setup where electrodes will be responsible for sparking a discharge. Further on, the water moves and is condensed because of some chemical reaction taking place in the spark apparatus. Eventually, what is formed is something similar to the first cell that was formed on this earth, which means this entire setup gives us an idea, is a simulation, is a mimicry, is a copy of how things must have worked on this earth in its most primitive form. So Miller's and Urey's experiment details we shall now be seeing. Miller and Urey experiments conducted supported the theory of chemical evolution of life. Both of them, one being the student of the other, perform experiments. And these experiments we perform in the same lines as that of Oparin Haldane's theory of chemical evolution. In this theory, please refer to page number 96 of your textbook. In this theory, they selected a spark discharge apparatus an apparatus, a setup where there at some point there is spark that is generated, that is discharged by the electrodes. That consisted of a closed system. It was a closed system. There was no entry or exit without being in control. Having tungsten electrodes, there was a flask that helped in boiling the water. There was a tube that was connected to the vacuum pump, which is clearly seen in the textbook diagram on page 96. And there was a cooling jacket. This cooling jacket served one purpose, so that whatever came in along with water was cooled down, which led to the condensation, cooling of the water, which was in water vapor state. And finally, the contents that you received could be tracked, which means, in other words, could be collected and tested for its quality, content. Entire apparatus had to be evacuated, had to be cleared, and it had to be made sterile, which was being done. Let us actually see how the process now started. I have given you the entire recipe for Miller's Urey experiment, except for the key ingredients. I have been talking about water vapor, which is converted because of water being heated. I have been talking about electrodes, which are generating spark discharge. I have been talking about condenser, bringing about the precipitation of water, cooling of water. I have been talking about the collecting outlet, which will collect the contents. I have been talking about heat that is supplied. Last and the most important of all, now I will talk about three components. The flask that was filled with water will also have, along with this water, a mixture that is made up of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen. This methane, ammonia, and hydrogen are the key ingredients. If you remember chemical theory of evolution, we have talked about how methane, how ammonia, and hydrogen were responsible for a series of reactions taking place. That's exactly what Miller and Urey are trying to explain in this today's experiment. They are saying that when methane, ammonia, and hydrogen are mixed in a certain amount, in a certain ratio, in a certain proportion, when there is mixing of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen along with water, and a setup is created for this mixture to pass on to. तो हम लोग क्या कर रहे हैं? वाटर, मीथेन, अमोनिया और हाइड्रोजन को लेके कहीं पे तो फॉरवर्ड कर रहे हैं, और जहां पे उसको फॉरवर्ड कर रहे हैं वहां पे हम स्पार्क डिस्चार्ज प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं. आई रिपीट, in the ratio of 1:2:2, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen were taken. And slowly, just a second, slowly they were passed through the stopcock. As they were passed, without allowing any air because it's a closed system, prebiotic environment was simulated in this apparatus. Prebiotic environment was stimulated in this apparatus. तो ये apparatus में अभी क्या क्या contents है? There is water vapor because water is in heated form. There is methane, there is ammonia, and there is hydrogen. Methane, ammonia, hydrogen, along with water in this setup is all set to react. However, they need an external factor, an external environment. As the factors that were provided during the prebiotic primitive environment of the earth in the form of lightning, volcanic eruptions, heat, similarly, these two electrodes are going to generate a spark discharge. The heat supplied is slow, temperature has risen, spark discharge has been provided, water is present in the boiling form. All these are appropriate for bringing life on the primitive earth. Similarly, somewhere in this experimental setup, what you will get towards the end is now being generated, is now being produced, is now being formed. This flask simulated का meaning क्या है? Copied, mimicked, replicated the primitive atmosphere on this earth. Water vapors along with these three gases were continuously circulated through a high electric spark of 75,000 volts. Obviously, the temperatures were high. There was continuous lightning kind of environment provided because of the electrode spark. These sparks were provided to this setup for several days, leaving the gases with no other option but to react. So methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, along with water vapor, because of a long duration being put up in this setup, had no other choice but to react among themselves. Continuous sparks led to simulated lightning. Lightning जैसा environment वहां पे create हो गया because of the sparks being provided by these two electrodes. Mixture of these gases now had reacted for a period of 7 to 8 days, after which these gases and the water vapor content, all of this was allowed to move ahead and pass through a condenser. This condenser will condense the liquid, condensify the liquid, bring down the cooling of the liquid. And this liquefied mixture that is condensed will be now collected because it is trapped. उसको और कोई जगह नहीं है because of the cooling effect or cold water being provided from outside or it being cooled down. This water will now come down in the form of precipitate along with its content. However, water has come down, but the components which were present inside have now gone to a next degree level. They have changed its behavior. They have formed few new kind of components. How will we come to know about what is being formed or what changes have taken place? Very simple. We have to analyze them. We have to study them. On studying of the trap sample, on studying of the sample being collected, we find out that a variety of the key word for today's experiment, a variety of simple organic compounds, especially amino acids, sugars, were found in this sample solution. Obviously, हम लोग अभी इतने primitive stage में नहीं हैं. We are advanced. We have enough knowledge because of the last two lectures, and we know that amino acids and sugars are responsible for forming one of the first original molecules of life on this earth. हमारा DNA जो है, which is made up of pentose sugar, nitrogen base, phosphate group, जिसमें amino acids है component के form में. So obviously, if I am able to collect amino acids and sugar because of this experimental setup, by providing an environment that was similar, that was replica of what was present on the primitive earth, can I not conclude that life must have originated in its first form because of something like this. That is exactly what Miller and Urey are trying to say. They give out the significance which talks in volumes about how the first life came on this earth. Miller and Urey's significance, which could be asked again for 2-mark question, is demonstrated. It's demonstrated, that is, they showed the formation of amino acids, sugars, other simple organic compounds, which when combined and recombined were responsible for first life cell on this earth. They have simulated the conditions in the lab that could have prevailed on the primitive earth, that could have ruled this primitive earth. They have provided vital evidence. Proof के बगैर नहीं काम चलेगा. हमारे पास प्रूफ है कि जब हमने स्पार्क डिस्चार्ज दिया, जब हमने मीथेन, अमोनिया और वाटर along with हाइड्रोजन प्रोवाइड किया, तो क्या हुआ? फर्स्ट लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स का जो बिल्डिंग ब्लॉक्स है, का जो सेल्स है, वो सेल लाइक सेटअप हमारे लैब में क्रिएट हुआ और ऐसे ही प्राइमोर्डियल अर्थ पे हुआ रहेगा. It also showed how the first proteins have been synthesized or how the first proteins have been formed where non-enzymatic reactions have taken place. जहां पे कोई एंजाइम्स इन्वॉल्व नहीं है, कोई ट्रिगर नहीं है. Without any trigger, these reactions have taken place in the form of chemicals I'm talking here. Is that clear? So this is an experimental setup that talks about how the first life on this earth originated. That is Miller's Urey experiment. It could be asked as a short question in the form of a diagram or description. I hope each one of you has understood the concept of Miller-Urey experiment. Please go through this so that you are able to understand this simple concept which supports the chemical theory of evolution. Is that clear? So today we have started with a new concept. Now what we will do is we will go on to another concept. On the next page of your book, my dear students, what you see is the RNA world hypothesis. Let me briefly introduce you to this concept of RNA world hypothesis. RNA world hypothesis. Now, I would want one of you to unmute yourself and answer any one of the questions that I put forth now or propose. Okay? So I'll begin with my questions. My first question to you is, one second, just give me a minute. My first question to you is, what is it that you know about DNA? Have you come across this word DNA in your last year's lecture? Entire academic year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, may I know who is speaking right now? Hello? Amatullah, right? No? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me, girls?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Okay. So my first question to you all is, what is it that you know about DNA? You have to answer by unmuting yourself. Yes, Amatullah, please answer.
Deoxyribose nucleotide acid.
Okay, so DNA is deoxyribose nucleotide acid. Please get your basics right. Deoxyribose nucleic acid is DNA is something that you should be knowing by now in the first place. Okay, fine. So deoxyribose nucleic acid के बारे में और क्या मालूम है?
Miss, it is a double helix structure.
It's a double-stranded structure. Absolutely right. Correct. So what is it that you know? Could you add a little more about this double-stranded structure?
It has four.
One person at it. You have to mention your name and then speak, please.
Its duty. It has 4 nucleotide groups.
Okay. But okay, fine. You are talking about now the structure, right? Correct. But what does this DNA do? What role does it play?
Ma'am, it carries our information, our details, what we have.
Correct, correct. So Amatullah is saying that DNA is responsible for carrying the genetic information from one generation to another. आज तक हमने जिंदगी में सारा क्रेडिट जो है इंफॉर्मेशन पास ऑन करने का 90% का क्रेडिट हमने डीएनए को दिया है. Is my point clear, everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, great.
Yes, ma'am.
आज तक हमने डीएनए को सब क्रेडिट दिया. हमने क्या बोला है कि डीएनए इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर कैरिंग द जेनेटिक इंफॉर्मेशन. और डीएनए कहाँ पे है? डीएनए इज प्रेजेंट इन द सेल. यू ऑल नो अबाउट दिस. In the nucleus of the cell, to be more precise, and this DNA is responsible for carrying the genetic information. ये आज तक हमको पता है. But today we're going to study about a hypothesis. Hypothesis मतलब कल से मैं बोलने लगूं कि the moon is yellow in color, and you will say, no ma'am, it is white. I'll say, see, this is my hypothesis, but I have enough evidences to prove it. मेरे पास ऐसी कुछ information है जिसकी वजह से I can prove to you all that the moon is yellow in color. You will say, come on, put forward. We will discuss. Let's get into a group discussion. Correct? We will negotiate. We will talk about merits, demerits. Similarly, coming to our point, this DNA, which is genetic information coder, giving you the code, has been universally accepted. But on similar lines, there is another concept, which is the RNA world hypothesis, wherein scientists have proved or given enough evidences to support this theory. And what do these evidences say? These evidences talk about
Ma'am, you are mute.
for obvious reasons, girls. Okay, let's continue. Very sorry for that interruption. So, there is a similar theory that talks about how this world must have formed not from DNA, but it is formed from RNA. Okay, so in this RNA world hypothesis, we will talk about the RNA being responsible for life on this earth, the first life on this earth. Is that clear with all of you girls? Have you understood the concept of RNA world hypothesis? Great. So we shall see why is this RNA world hypothesis also universally accepted. What is the reason for the RNA? How this RNA is responsible for bringing life into existence. Is that clear? Now, I will share a slide and we shall see a video.
You'd find yourself in a dinosaur world. 500 million years ago was a world of trilobites and other strange sea creatures. 3.4 billion years ago was the world of the first living cells. And if you were to go back further still, scientists suspect that chains of a chemical called RNA, or something similar to RNA, kickstarted this entire beautiful mess that we call life. RNA is thought to have given rise to life for several reasons. Chains of RNA are found.
Excuse
You're
me,
not
ma'am.
able to see. Yes, beta, tell me.
We are not able to see the video.
You are not able to see the video.
No.
Yes,
So,
ma'am, we are not able to.
so what do you see on the screen?
A link. YouTube link.
You just see the YouTube link. You cannot see the video that I've opened.
The audio was playing.
No,
Not
ma'am.
a video was there.
Acha, so you are able to see the audio, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You are not able to see the video. Could you just give me a second? This is going to be 1 minute, huh? Let me try it one more time. Now are you able to see beta?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. एक minute, huh? Okay.
120 million years, you'd find yourself in a dinosaur world. 500 million years ago was a world of trilobites and other strange sea creatures. 3.4 billion years ago was the world of the first living cells. And if you were to go back further still, scientists suspect that chains of a chemical called RNA, or something similar to RNA, kickstarted this entire beautiful mess that we call life. RNA is thought to have given rise to life for several reasons. Chains of RNA are found abundantly in all living cells today. RNA is a close chemical cousin to DNA, and with very little help from researchers, RNA chains can replicate, evolve, and interact with their environments. While many details have yet to be worked out, the RNA world hypothesis is the simple idea that somewhere on our early planet, perhaps in a tide pool or hot spring, the Earth's chemistry was producing random chains of RNA. Once formed, they began replicating, evolving, and competing with each other for survival. As these chains evolved and diversified, some eventually began cooperating to produce the genetic code, a wide array of complex proteins, and even living cells which, from the perspective of RNA, can actually be thought of as houses or survival machines for RNA to live inside. To understand how RNA chains can interact with their environments, replicate, and evolve, we first need to understand the simple process of base pairing. Chains of RNA are made of nucleotides, small molecules that come in 4 different types labeled A, C, U, and G. The backbone atoms of a nucleotide, shown here as a yellow bar, can form strong chemical bonds with the backbone atoms of any other RNA nucleotide. This means that different chains can have completely different sequences from left to right. The parts we call the bases of nucleotides, the colored sections labeled A, C, U, or G, are attracted to other bases sort of like a magnet, but they're selective about who they will stick to. G selectively pairs with C, A selectively pairs with U. When bases find their matches and stick together, we call it base pairing. Researchers have found that with a little bit of assistance, base pairing allows chains of RNA to replicate and evolve. Here's how it works. When a long chain of RNA is suspended in cool water with high concentrations of free nucleotides, the chain can act as a template for its own replication. Nucleotides automatically base pair with their partners on the existing chain. If their backbone atoms form chemical bonds with each other, and by the way, this is the part that currently requires assistance from researchers. We're not yet sure how this would have happened in the wild. A complementary RNA strand is born, one with the exact inverse sequence of the original. If the water is then heated, paired bases lose their grip, allowing both chains to act as templates when the cycle repeats. The great thing about this process is that every other RNA chain produced is a copy of the original, but sometimes mutations slip in. This means that as chains compete for survival and reproduction, true evolution, descent with modification, acted upon by selection, can operate on chains of RNA. As amazing as replication is, base pairing also gives RNA chains a second special ability. When placed in water cool enough for base pairing, but without enough free nucleotides for replication, chains will fold up and base pair with themselves. The end result is a complex shape with certain sticky bases pointing outward because they weren't able to find partners. These sticky outward-facing bases can cause unique chemical reactions by interacting with other molecules in their environment. A folded chain of RNA capable of guiding a specific chemical reaction is what we call a ribozyme. Some ribozymes break certain molecules apart, others join certain molecules together. A ribozyme's specific function is determined by its specific shape, and its shape is determined by its sequence. If a mutation changes a ribozyme's sequence, the shape can be modified, and so can its function. When ribozymes were first discovered, scientists wondered how difficult it would be for random chains of RNA to evolve legitimate survival functions. Imagine, for example, a ribozyme that could build nucleotides out of molecules it finds in its environment. Across multiple generations, natural selection could promote and refine this ribozyme because the chain would tend to have access to more free nucleotides than its rivals, allowing it to replicate more often. To explore this idea, researchers at Simon Fraser University produced a large group of random RNA chains and examined them to see if any happened to be able to make nucleotides. Surprisingly, some actually could, but they weren't very efficient. Researchers selected out the successful chains and then used a lab technique called PCR to quickly replicate them with slight random mutations. After just 10 rounds of PCR, followed by selection, highly efficient nucleotide-building ribozymes evolved. These are molecules with the lifelike ability to actively participate in their own survival.
All right, girls. We will take a pause here and try to understand what this is all about, what this video talks about. Understand. When we talk about the RNA world hypothesis, this word which talks about own survival or its ability to produce something or life giving is the fundamental basis of RNA world hypothesis. The RNA world is a hypothetical stage, is something that has been put forth and which needs evidence in the evolutionary history of life. जैसे हम बोलते हैं कि DNA is responsible for carrying information from one place to another, that is one generation to another. Similarly, RNA is also to be held responsible for passing of information. In fact, scientists have gone ahead one step and proposed that RNA could be the whole guiding force. Matlab, all of this replication must have started from RNA, in which precisely we are talking about self-replicating RNA. RNA अपने स्टार्ट में वीडियो में देखा है कि खुद से ही वो रेप्लिकेट कर सकता है. These replicating RNA molecules must have proliferated, which means grown in numbers. Before DNA and proteins came into existence, अपना नोकिया सादा फोन पहले था, उससे बहुत सारा अपना काम चलता था. Similarly, scientists are saying that yes, today the other Android versions rule the world. Today we talk about so much in such large numbers and content wise also about DNA. But there has been a time when RNA ruled this earth. This term also refers to how life must have come into picture before DNA evolved. There were scientists working in this field, two of which we shall be studying today. They said that DNA से life proposed नहीं हुआ है. Life proposed because of the chemical path that has evolved from RNA. So this life on Earth is RNA based life. This is exactly how the first life must have come into existence. Even so, the evidence of RNA world is very strong because of the content that scientists have provided, and because of which this hypothesis has been worldwide accepted. The concurrent formation आपने अभी वीडियो में देखा, concurrent which is simultaneous formation, कि how adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, your uracil replaces one of the components, and simultaneously RNA keeps on building its chain, supporting its hypothesis. Why and how could RNA be a possibility for life to evolve? RNA का distant cousin है DNA. तो जैसे डीएनए रेप्लिकेट करता है वैसे अपना आरएनए भी रेप्लिकेट कर सकता है. जैसे डीएनए एक लॉन्ग पॉलीन्यूक्लियोटाइड चेन है, आरएनए इज आल्सो अ पॉलीन्यूक्लियोटाइड चेन, which means it can store information, it can replicate, it can use this information. Also, like proteins and enzymes, RNA has specific enzymes. These enzymes, the screen says the word ribozymes. These ribozymes are catalysts. What is the function or the role of a catalyst? The function of a catalyst is to start, to instigate, to propose, to put forth, to accelerate the whole act of a chemical reaction. So अपना ribosomes जो RNA का enzymes है वो क्या करेगा? It will start the chemical reactions which are responsible for life to originate. One of the most critical components of the cells in today's times, when I talk about a cell, please mute yourself, girls, is a ribosome. We all know, just give me a second, girls.
These ribozymes and many others produced through similar experiments.
Girls, please mute yourself. So this, in today's times, a cell which has a ribosome, basically, if you see the structure of a ribosome and content of a ribosome, उस राइबोसोम में आरएनए डेफिनेटली है, मेजर पार्ट ऑफ इट इज आरएनए. इफ द आरएनए वर्ल्ड एग्जिस्टेड, अगर ये आरएनए वर्ल्ड हम जो अभी लास्ट 15 मिनट्स में बोल रहे हैं, ऐसा अगर कुछ हुआ रहेगा, इफ दिस आरएनए हाइपोथेसिस is considered propagated to be true, then it is probably because of evolution of the ribonucleoproteins. The ribonucleoproteins have helped in this RNA evolution journey. And later on, this RNA has assured or forced, provoked the DNA to form and take up the responsibility of passing the genetic information. अभी डीएनए ज्यादा क्यों सक्सेसफुल हुआ रहेगा आरएनए से? उसका कॉम्पोजिशन देखो कैसा है. डीएनए is more longer. DNA can form more complex proteins. DNA Android version जैसा है, better in all aspects, and that is why today DNA becomes the fundamental material for genetic information to be passed over or conquering the RNA world hypothesis, putting it behind and moving ahead and saying that please accept me more. I have enough evidence to prove that life can originate from me. However, today we are talking about RNA world hypothesis. Today's hero is DNA, no doubt. But somewhere along the lines of evolution, क्योंकि हम evolution सीख रहे हैं, इसलिए it is being included in this chapter. We are also not ignoring the fact that somewhere RNA is also to be held responsible for propagation of life. Eventually, what happened in this journey is protein enzymes may have come to replace RNA-based ribozymes. Ribozymes तो functional है, लेकिन उससे भी better functioning है हमारे protein enzymes, amino acid chain system and everything else, which can act today as biocatalysts because of their greater potential. उनका potential और ज़्यादा है, abundantly available है, diverse है, large numbers में present है, जिसकी वजह से पूरा scene change होता है. So today in RNA world hypothesis, we are giving due credit to this our humble RNA who could also possibly have contributed in the evolution of life. Girls, have you understood the video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I will support this content or information with my PPT. So what is RNA world hypothesis? It is a pathway. It is a method in which origin of life goes from non-living to living. We all know like begets like. We all know that a cat will give birth to a cat, a dog will give birth to a dog, human beings give birth to human beings. And because of this unique ability, we also know that whatever is present within us is passed on to the next generation. So all the necessities, which all what is required will be necessitated, will be passed on to make a stable genetic material for the next generation. So our ability to pass on information is our cell machinery, is our factory outlet for continuation of life. मेरा factory है each one of us. If we want life to propagate, we have to bring a new life into existence. Routine activities, everyday activities are carried out by each of our cell. अभी थोड़े टाइम के बाद 1 बजे तक if I continue with my lecture, your stomach will start growling and then it will go on to next level at 1:30 and 1:35 you will say, ma'am, bus, we need to eat something, which is because of a protein activity, which is because of enzymes. Digestive enzymes will start making noise, giving a signal to your brain. So routine activities today are carried out by our cell. Enzymes, which are proteins, catalyze the chemical reactions in the cell. They bring about the chemical reactions. So what is a catalyst? Could any one of you tell me what is a catalyst?
The rate of reaction.
Catalyst
Catalyst
is
increase
One person,
Of
one
reaction.
person at a time.
Increase
catalyst
the
catalyst
rate
is
of
increases
reaction.
the speed of
Okay, it
reaction.
speeds up the rate of reaction. Correct, that's right. Please mute yourself. Absolutely. So you're also similarly, these enzymes that are there, ribozymes, they are going to speed up, accelerate, fasten, help in the rate of reactions. RNA world hypothesis was supported by many scientists. In the year 1980, we are studying these two scientists because they are included in your textbook, as simple as that. In the year 1980, Sidney Altman and Thomas Zech, these two scientists independently found out that RNA could also be used as a biocatalyst, had contents within itself कि उसको भी तुम due credit दो कि it could also be responsible for life on this earth. These catalytic RNAs that could bring about a reaction were called as ribozymes. Ribosomes तुम्हारे सेल में है, वो अलग है. ये है राइबोजाइम. राइबो एंजाइम से वर्ड हुआ है, राइबोसोम्स एंड एंजाइम्स. Ribozyme. They both earned a Nobel Prize for this discovery of theirs in chemistry in the year 1989. RNA world hypothesis talks about early life which could exclusively be based on nucleic acids. RNA भी तो nucleic acid है. Most probably RNA ही रहेगा which is responsible for life. ये तो उनको मिला है नोबेल प्राइज 1989 में, लेकिन बैक इन दी ओल्ड 1960s, three scientists worked and gave a similar concept of ribozymes. ये तीन लोग भी वही चीज बोले in the year 1960s. What did they say? Somewhere we also feel that this RNA is having enough potential to bring about series of reactions because of its ability to function at ribozymal level, having ribozymes, sorry, beg your pardon. RNA, this is what is being explained by me when we were seeing the video. It is found everywhere in all living cells. क्यों नहीं सपोर्ट करेगा लाइफ को? डेफिनेटली सपोर्ट करेगा. स्ट्रक्चरली डीएनए का कजन है. It is related to DNA, somewhat identical to DNA except for the uracil part. Chains of RNA can evolve and undergo mutations, जो हमने वीडियो में देखा. Replicate कर सकते हैं, catalyze कर सकते हैं, instigate कर सकते हैं एक रिएक्शन को. बायोमोलिक्यूल्स है उसमें एक एग्जाम्पल की तौर पे, बिकॉज ऑफ विच अ न्यूक्लियोटाइड can explain its molecular structure. Existence of ribosome. अगर हम एक राइबोसोम, एक सेल में एक राइबोसोम है, राइबोजाइम नहीं, राइबोसोम को अगर हम स्टडी करें तो राइबोसोम में हमको आज भी समझ में आता है. Till date also, if we want to study a ribosome, we know majority of it has RNA. So because of all of this, why should we not give due credit to RNA? अगर वो replicate कर सकता है, अगर वो multiply कर सकता है, अगर वो mutation भी कर सकता है, अगर वो catalyze करता है, reactions bring about करता है, why is our RNA not considered as a potent candidate for life to be propagated? That is the reason this RNA was concept of world hypothesis was universally accepted in large numbers. इतना ही नहीं, if you study the concept of protein synthesis क्या है? You're going to study that in detail in the molecular basis of inheritance, जो आपका chapter है. In molecular basis of inheritance, you will clearly see that what is protein synthesis? When the information that is present in the DNA is passed on to RNA, and because of which proteins are formed. I repeat, DNA से information RNA में जाता है, RNA से information protein synthesis form करता है, proteins form होते हैं हमारे body में. ये है protein synthesis which you are going to study in molecular basis of inheritance. लेकिन उसमें अगर हमारा RNA information pass कर सकता है, how can you give credit only to DNA and not to RNA? If my RNA can use itself as a potential carrier of information from your nucleus in the DNA to extraterrestrial nucleic area, न्यूक्लियस के बाहर के एरिया में हमारा आरएनए तो जाता है, तुम्हारा न्यूक्लियस तो आराम से न्यूक्लियस के अंदर तुम्हारा डीएनए बैठा है किंग की तरह. But my RNA is coming out all the way in the form of messenger RNA. You all will study this. But short me, I'm explaining. So why is not my RNA potential candidate for carrying information? And if my RNA can carry information, definitely you have to support my world hypothesis of RNA. These molecules everywhere we see, different types of RNA are also there. तुम्हारा DNA एक ही type का है. There are types of RNA. They are all able to carry out catalytic activities. और ऐसे ही हुआ रहेगा, according to this theory. They might have developed their own protein codes. They might have developed their own setup, their own mechanism, their own strategies, their own machinery to survive the assembly of primitive cell. In due course of time, we are also saying Android has come today into picture. In due course of time, तुम्हारा DNA भी आया है picture में. And today, continuation of this ongoing journey is because of DNA. But we have to say this and admit that आज जो rich biodiversity है on this earth, that is because of RNA hypothesis. RNA had a unique ability to use itself as a catalytic component to bring about reactions. Have you all followed the concept, girls, of RNA?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, excellent, excellent, very nice. Okay, in this last segment, today I have an assignment for you. Okay, I'll just take the lecture for another, continue with it for another 3 minutes, and then we shall stop the lecture. I have two things that you want to do. One, I want to find you how it is not a part of the textbook theory. If possible, I want to find you, and you can post messages, how this RNA world hypothesis. Just give me a second, girls. I'll just switch this off. Okay. How this RNA world hypothesis theory was criticized. I want you to know that. And I want you to find out that just for your information. DNA hero tha. Suddenly RNA ko hero banaya. You think scientists are going to keep quiet? So I want each one of you to be ready with 2 demerits next time when you come for the lecture. कि 2 demerits हमको देना है which will support the DNA and not the RNA. Okay, and we will discuss that. Second, currently in today's time, because we are studying evolution and origin of life, and because we are studying how life originated on this earth, and we were talking about stars and planets in our first lecture, and we all agree to it that we are all stars, which means we are all dust of the stars. That's the reason we have to call ourselves stars. So I want you all to find out, I'm sure some of you all must know about this. There is one comet that is seen in today's times. If you see in the sky, you are able to see one comet. What is the name of that comet? And after how many years does it come? Of course, because of the cloudy weather, you might not be able to see it. It might not be visible clearly. But if you have a clear sky, then this comet is visible. What is the name of this comet? It starts with N. I give you a clue. That is your one assignment. Each one of you will save one picture for yourself on your WhatsApp status. Write down about the comet so your friends also know about this comet. So two things you have to write down: the name of the comet and after how many years it makes its appearance. This is in line similar to what we are studying. And on that note, I complete my today's lecture. Any questions, please put forward.
Ma'am,
One person at a time, please. Yes, Amatullah.
ma'am, is this the role of carbon dioxide, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen in the form of RNA? That
Listen, Amatullah, I am not able to understand your question. Why don't you type it down? I'll be able to answer it better, beta.
okay,
ठीक है? Acha, listen, I will try my best to answer your questions. But in case you feel you're not satisfied with it, you could always ask it to me on via SMS, that is via a WhatsApp message also. Okay. If you need any kind of assistance regarding the same, please let me know. My PPTs are more than enough for you to plan your notes. So if you refer to it, it will help you a lot. And that is why you will see it has more content than pictures. Anybody else?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Amatullah. Yes, beta. I just want to see Amatullah's question. I'm waiting for it. Yes, in the meanwhile, next
Ma'am,
one. हाँ
you
बेटा
can
बोल.
you upload the 14th July lecture,
14
like
जुलाई
the
का
link which you
picture.
have sent it. No, no lecture, like the link which you have
Lecture,
sent it
lecture.
of the for 7th July. You send it a
Yes,
link, no?
Humaira.
It's likewise. Can you send for the 14th July also, and for today's also?
Yes, yes, definitely correct. I'll do that after this lecture immediately. Okay. However, I have sent you a link, a YouTube link. See, I always sent a link one day prior to my lecture. And what I expect you all to do is I want you all to go through the lecture so that you have certain kind of connectivity with the subject, the content, and the topic before you join the lecture for the day. So that is the whole purpose of sending it a day prior to the lecture. All right, Amatullah is saying carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen plays main role in RNA. Amatullah, I would suggest something. I want you to read the structure of RNA, which is in your book. Let me tell you the page number also for it. Just give me a second. अभी का अभी solve हो जाएगा वो question. On page, wait, molecular basis of page number, just come to page number 70 of your textbook. And on page central dogma, yes, and on page number 79 you have types of RNAs. So there you will come to know how a RNA is made. Also you could refer to other links. 83 page number gives you detailed structure of RNA and RNA types. So that will help you, Amatullah. She's also talking about the first RNA. A question has been put up which says information of the first RNA. See, if you want, we could refer to it just to, kind of get a brief idea. But if you ask me, it is not a part of the syllabus. The first form of RNA and its structure, ऐसा question syllabus में नहीं है.
actually, ma'am, I just want to ask that due to the RNA and due to the formation of ribosome, the life is going to be start due to the in mutation takes place, right, in RNA, and then it carry on the changes in the life. So I want to ask, where does the RNA molecule formed? If RNA molecule is formed, due to these, the formation of the life started, right? So how the RNA molecule just formed? I just want to ask this.
Okay. In my
So
video, in my lecture, today's lecture, there is a video that I have used. At the start of the video, in the first 1 minute, they talk about from where this first strand of RNA came. I'll give you a clue. You have to find it on your own. I'll give you a clue for it. Refer to the chemical theory of evolution that we have studied today. You got what I'm saying? उसमें वो code छिपा है. It is hidden in that. I am not going to reveal everything to you. You have to also do your homework. I'm giving you a clue. Refer to the chemical theory of evolution. Point number 2. Refer to the video in today's lecture. You'll get your answer. Yes. Anybody else?
thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Most welcome. Most welcome. Yes.
the last lecture you said you have to explain a part that is microspheres.
Microsphere, na? Okay, Humaira, when I started with today's lecture, I have mentioned about this. Co-acervate theory and microsphere theory is something that we will definitely look into, but not today. I think I don't know if you want, I can continue, but I feel that
No,
this
no,
is more
thank
than
you.
enough for today.
Oh,
We
ma'am.
will definitely complete it. Okay, I don't want to stretch you beyond that point where you
Okay.
lose out on your
No, I thought
interest.
you forgot.
Okay? No, I will not, for sure. Humaira, I won't forget. It will come up someday or the other. I don't forget easily what is important. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, girls. I hope of a general feedback, please, about the lecture. Can you just message something? Is there something that, what do you feel? It's not about just the good things. Hey, somebody, I am so happy to say this. So, Alia Hamid is the first girl. She's messaged. And Alia, are you there? Alia Hamid? Alia, please tell us what is it that you have to share with us? I'm super excited to know this from you at this point of time.
Ma'am,
Yes,
it
Alia.
is visible during dawn, during evening time at
एक
7
सेकेंड
o'clock.
एक सेकेंड एक सेकेंड आलिया इट मतलब कौन शीतल मैम विजिबल है कि और कौन आलिया विजिबल है हाँ आलिया टेल मी व्हाट इज इट
Comet is
what are you
visible.
talking about Alia could you tell it to the other girls
Ma'am, you told her to find out about the comet which is visible from Earth. So I have found out
very
the
nice
name of
I want to actually I am not so good at this but I just want to I just want to send you a smiley. Alia is talking about this comet. She has gone ahead and found out the name of the comet. Alia, tell us the name of the comet, please.
Neowise.
Fantastic. That's right. It's Neowise. Could you tell me something more about it?
Ma'am, uh,
Please do your research. Please do your homework. Find about this. But I'm happy that you went ahead and found out.
Ma'am,
Neowise is a comet that comes after a really, really long time. After how many years it comes? After every how many years? That you find out and let me know.
6,800 years. It is not visible on Earth from 6,800 years according to
Correct.
NASA.
It comes after almost more than actually 6,000 years. That's right. Correct. Correct. Very nice. So this is something very interesting, no, to know. There are so many things actually happening around us, around our earth, which we don't pay attention to. So we need to pop our heads out of this Android, WhatsApp thing, social media, and also look at the beauty that is there, present. Please have a look at the existing changes around you. And on that note, we shall end today's lecture. All the best to each one of you. Have a lovely day, girls. Thank you so much for being so cooperative.
thank you, ma'am. Good day, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Just a minute.
Thank you. 1 second, just a minute, huh? Just a minute. I have one thing to do. Just give me a second. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, 1 second, huh? Just give me a second. I'm downloading the attendance for today. All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Array.
You, ma'am.
Jumela Duty is there? Hello.
Hello.